Hey everyone, how are we doing? And welcome to this epic build guide to put together the ultimate gaming computer. We've got some super high-end components here today, including this brand new CPU from Intel, the Core i9-10900K, and an NVIDIA RTX 2080 Ti. So put everything here together, you should be able to get an epic gaming computer filled with RGB. It's super quiet, super powerful, and it's going to be awesome. So we're going to go through all of the components and show you how they all go together, show you the full build process, as well as performance, benchmarks, all of those great things. We start off by looking at the components. This is actually a box containing two CPUs. We have the Core i9-10900K, and then we do also have the Core i5 that we'll be using in a future build. Processors aside, we also have something equally as high-end. This is the 2080 Ti Strix from ASUS. And as you can see, this is an absolute beast of a graphics card. It is huge, it is 2.5 slots. There is plenty of RGB, as you'd expect, but for me, it's all about the performance really that you get, not just in terms of FPS, but the cooler in this does a very good job of keeping the temperatures down. But obviously these cards are very expensive, so you have to bear this in mind. They're not the most accessible things, but if you want the very best, something like the Strix card is probably the way you're going to want to go. Now, cooling is a bit of an interesting one, because with the Core i9, you're definitely going to need something that's up there, right? We could talk about the whole AMD Ryzen versus the Intel CPUs, and we will be doing that in a future video. But what you need to know is that the Core i9 is going to run quite hot, especially if you want to overclock it, but even if you don't, it's still going to run quite toasty. So you're going to need something like this. It is a 240mm liquid cooler. This one is the Kraken X52. They're very good. They sound not very loud. They're quiet, is probably the word I was looking for. But I really love that they have this very cool like mirror finish screen. You've got a few different effects on there. It's pretty cool. But it's not quite as high-end as NZXT's Z series of water coolers. Those actually can give you live readouts. In terms of the motherboard that we're using, this is the Maximus Hero 12. And yes, there have been 12 iterations of this, but they're brilliant motherboards actually. I would describe them as almost high mid-range in the sense that you get all of the features really that I think you're going to use, things like extra fan headers, better I/O, more PCIe slots for SSDs, all of that good stuff. But then you're not paying an extortionate amount of money for things you probably won't use, but it does make sense to get a motherboard that sort of matches what you need. But Heroes have been very reliable in my experience, not had any issues with those, so looking forward to using it. Power supply wise, this is the Straight Power 11. It is a platinum power supply, which is why we're using it in this build. The question is 650 watts going to be enough? Statistically, I would say absolutely. But if I was actually buying this PC for myself, I probably would look at getting an 850 watt version just to give myself a little bit more breathing room. But if you're never going to overclock, then I'm sure this would be perfectly fine. And even if you are, again, it's probably absolutely fine. In terms of the RAM that we're using, this is some Trident Z Neo. It looks slightly different to the standard Trident Z, and it's actually designed to have better compatibility with Ryzen, but it shouldn't matter for Intel builds. Looking good, 32 gigabytes of the stuff, and I believe this is, yes, 3200 megahertz. Could go slightly faster if you wanted to, but in terms of real world gaming benefits, not sure you're going to see that much difference. We're using an RGB SSD because yes, RGB obviously makes this thing run much, much faster. Disclaimer. May not run faster because of RGB. This one is 1 terabyte in capacity, which is probably what I'd recommend really if you can afford it. PCIe SSDs are actually getting a whole lot cheaper these days as well, so it's not really out of the question like it was before. You'll notice better load times with things like Windows and games, but it's not essential, but it will give you a noticeable performance boost nonetheless. Fan-wise, we're going down the RGB route. These are the QL140s. I haven't actually used these before, so quite excited to do so. I believe they're like the LL fans, but evolved, so the best RGB fans that Corsair actually do at the moment. But don't worry, we will be putting that to the test. The final piece of the puzzle really, and I'm actually going to have to move some things around to be able to show you this, is the case. And this is definitely, I think, something that's quite exciting to me because this is the P600S. This case is massive and it's a very exciting bit of kit. The thing that's really the thing that works for me is that you can just take this front panel off and allow it to breathe. So if you're doing something high end, like maybe you're rendering or maybe you're playing your games and you want to get as much air in as possible, then you can take the front panel off and allow everything to breathe. And then the rest of the time, or if you're doing something that isn't quite as high end, you can just stick the panel back on the front and keep things a little bit quieter. To kick everything off, we're going to make ourselves plenty of room in our workspace, as this is going to make it a lot easier. I do always build on top of the motherboard first before placing it inside the case. I'm sure many of you know this already, but it does make it a whole lot easier. So simply grab the motherboard and take it out of the box, put it on top, lift up the CPU cover. So here is our Core i9, still the same size as the previous generations, it's just a slightly different socket, so you will need to grab a new motherboard if you're interested. Find the little arrow that is actually located on the CPU, and then you need to find the little arrow on the board. Here it's a little dot, and then it's just a case of dropping that in without any force, lowering down the cover. Then we need to grab our RAM, so that's 24 gig, and there you go, that is all of our sticks. Next up, it's our NVMe SSD, and something that I've been told is very boring, but I'm going to tell you anyway because I care about my followers, is that this normal screwdriver that you're going to use for your entire build is going to be too big to actually install a PCIe SSD, as I will now demonstrate. Look, oh look, the screwdriver doesn't fit. Who would have guessed that? So you're going to need a slightly smaller one for your PCIe SSD. Oh no, we've got clearance issues. This is a disaster. We can't use it. Look at that, that's rubbish. Fortunately, that crisis has now been averted, and I think this is going to work. I should note that you do need to grab the little silver screw out of the motherboard box, otherwise you won't have anything to actually screw your NVMe SSD into. And if my calculations are correct, that sounded very nerdy, this should now just slide in. There you go, just like that, without too many issues. Happy days. I'm glad that worked because I got worried. You should now have something that looks something along the lines of this, our completed motherboard combo. I really do like the fact that we've got these silver accents dotted about, and it's actually on the RAM as well. It's almost as if I did that deliberately, but I promise you I didn't on this particular occasion. All we need to do is attach a back plate directly onto the motherboard. We have the very familiar Intel back plate here that you simply lift up the board, like so. Drop it on the floor, that always helps. Screw these down until they're hand tight, I guess. Then we just need to grab our motherboard and slide it into the position. As this motherboard actually has a back plate on it already, we thankfully don't need to put that in ourselves. Something that I absolutely love about Phanteks cases, that all the screws come neatly organized in this little box, which is not only great for actually building the PC, but then storing them later. I don't know why other manufacturers don't do this. Maybe it costs too much money, but if Phanteks are doing it, why can't everybody? So you should now have something that looks along the lines of this, your little skeleton. We're going to swap out the fans now, so what we need to do is just grab our screwdriver and take them out. It's just 4 screws really, pretty simple stuff. So what I've done is I've gone 140, 140, and then the old 140. I've put a 120 on the rear, and then where the radiator will go at the top, we're going to have 2 of those RGB 120s. Now all we need to do is actually fit the radiator itself, which in a case like this is very simple. Drop your screws on the floor. That's always a great way to build a PC. I'm just being a bit of a wally. I swear there are just so many of these English words that Americans would never say, and they're like, what on earth are you talking about? But that's the joy of watching PC Centric. That's what I'm all about. Boring bit out of the way, and this should then very nice and neatly plop back into place where we had it before. As this is brand new, we do actually have thermal paste pre-applied, but you can of course remove this and put your own one if you prefer. You can see we're making nice progress, and this is starting to come along and look pretty swish. Which camera am I looking at? There's a red light on this one, so we're live. We're not. I think I'm going to slot in the graphics card next, and this is perhaps a little bit of a strange order. There is no right or wrong way of doing things, but as this is quite a big case, it's really not too difficult to get everything nice and cabled up neatly. So let's have a look at the uglier side, and there's going to be a fair bit of work to do here. We've got all of these cables from the RGB fans. These go into a Corsair RGB controller, which always adds a little bit of mess. So what we're going to do is grab all of the fan cables and all of these I/O cables for your case, power buttons, USB, all of that stuff. We're going to plug these in, and then we're going to go for the power supply. This would have been actually better to do without the graphics card being inside, so I've sort of made my life a bit more difficult than it needed to be there, but I reckon I can do it. I've made more PCs than you've had hot dinners. If you are watching this and you're building in this case, don't put the graphics card in, wait, do it last. The rest of our I/O is down the bottom. We have our HD audio, which is always the longest cable. This goes right at the bottom left-hand side. The tiny little cables are pretty easy to plop in once you know what they are. Power is always on the top, LEDs are always on the left. So by process of elimination, top left is power LEDs, top middle is power switch, below that is the reset switch, HD, D, LEDs are on the left. Corsair's RGB fans now uses this, which they call the lighting node core, which is a bit of a weird name. They should have called it the lighting... Oh, they couldn't call it the lighting node pro because they already used that. That's what you get, Corsair, for naming your products Pro before you've come out with a base version. This is actually better, but it sounds like a worse version. So this one is better because it goes into the case and only requires SATA power and then USB. There's none of that silly flick switches that you had before and needing 2 units just to do one simple job. It was very annoying, so I'm actually quite glad to see that that has improved. Make sure that you do put them in the right order though, because if you miss one out, you maybe plug number 6 and number 2 in, then they might not light up at all. That was something that was quite annoying actually with the old ones. You can really see the problem though with what I'm talking about in terms of the mess, because you just get so many cables now. You've got twice as many and you have a lot more fans than most systems would. So it's going to require a little bit of TLC, I think, to get this looking neat. So other than making a huge mess, we now have our almost complete PC. The last thing that I like to do is plop in the power supply, because this really does add all of that mess in. I'll tell you what, I've never seen this before. The screw has just broken. So we just grab our power supply and it will slide into the back, like so. But don't do this just yet, because you want to grab those cables and route them through the case so that you can just push it in nice and simply. Otherwise you're making life a lot harder for yourself than need be. You've got these quite cool cable tidies on this actually. That definitely makes it a bit easier. So I like to feed them all through first and then plug them all in one go over the other side. And then this is where that little cable tidy comes in handy, because we can feed that through, make a lovely noise in the process, and then this, look, just comes further forward, locks into place, looks good. Really not a fan of how Corsair have put these horrible labels on all of their cables. I'm going to cut them all off. Why do that? You're clearly going to be able to see them. It's a nightmare. So here we go then. I am a bit nervous, but very excited to see just what this computer can do, because in theory, this should be the fastest gaming computer you can build with a single graphics card at the moment. Sorry about the mess, but I always like to do it like this just in case there are any problems. So you can quickly turn everything off. Doesn't look like there are any clearance issues, no cables and any fans. So let's see what's going on. We've got a first little boot cycle, that's okay. I was expecting that. Fans look good on the front, actually. I think I did a good job there. I could definitely fit another one in there. But are we going to get a signal on screen? Are we going to get lighting up? We've got a couple of boot loops. One too many for my liking, but let's find out. Always look at the error codes. It tells you what's going on. That does not sound good. Unlike Ryzen PCs, they're not meant to do this. Hey! Honestly, what is it about doing these PCs while filming? It is so stressful. It's like, it's not even just stress, it's upsetting. Because I know what happens if this doesn't work. It's hours and hours of pain, toil, troubleshooting, getting upset. And the lovely Michelle behind the camera has to go make me a cup of tea, calm me down, tell me it's gonna be okay, but it's fine. It's fine, and I'm getting a look for that. Will it make the video? It's making the video. I'm mesmerized by the case actually. With the fans, that looks awesome. I was not planning to say this, but I genuinely might use this as my own case, because I've been needing more airflow, and this not only looks incredible, but it has all of the airflow. That's excellent. Installing Windows is very simple. Just grab a USB drive and then go and download the Windows ISO. Just Google Windows 10 ISO. You don't need a product key at first. You can activate it later. Give me a few hours just to get some games on this thing. actually see what it's capable of, and we'll go from there. So then, it has been, ow, I've just smashed my leg on the desk. Fast forward around about 3 hours and we are literally jumping straight into the games. You see what I did there. Starting off with Apex Legends. This monitor is 3440 by 1440, so if you're wanting to run a slightly higher resolution like 4K, then obviously take a little bit off that frame rate. Whereas if you're going to be running like 1440p or 1080p, then obviously you can increase that. Let me know, by the way, what you think of this live format of actually showing you the frame rate on screen rather than just giving you averages, because I think this is actually probably more useful and it's better to watch, but it might not be. So you can decide how I do this going forward. Is this good to watch, or would you rather see something else? Oh, that is so bright. I think HDR is on. Can you see me, or can you just see the white thing that's blasting in my face? Jesus. Here we go then, Battlefield 5. By far the best looking game, I think, in our roster. Maybe Control actually is slightly better. And we're getting around about the same as Apex actually, which is almost surprising, around about 120, 130 frames a second. It is going to dip a little bit when we get a load of explosions and things on screen, but this feels so fluid, it's lovely. If you're not in that high refresh rate game, I highly recommend that you give it a go. Let's detonate these barrels to see what happens, and there's a guy right next to me that I've stabbed up, and we didn't really dip there below 100 frames a second, so it gives you a very good idea of what to expect. How, of course, could we leave out Fortnite? I definitely think it needs to make any sort of PC benchmarking list, and I am surprised at just how good it can look. It is a very different art style, make no mistake. Even if it's 4K, 144 Hz, okay, you need to turn some of the settings down, but I think this proves that this is a beast of a PC, there's no doubt about that. I'm hiding in a box, apparently. Is that a thing now? Well, there is! Oh no! Hey! Oh, whoa, there's another guy! This always happens, I need to pay attention. Now for our final game, we have this, XCOM Chimera Squad, something that I thought is a little bit different, but I wanted to show you something I'm actually playing myself rather than just all of the most popular titles. It only came out a few weeks ago, it's great fun actually. And you can see we're still getting pretty much maxing it out actually at about 144 frames a second, but it does dip to the 120s. Oh, and before I forget, I know you guys are going to be asking about temperatures, so I've done a little test for you. We've got Cinebench running. It's both totally fine and also a bit worrying at the same time, because this is all running at stock and we're hitting maxes of around about 81 degrees, which is great. But it goes to show that getting yourself a powerful cooler on this is very important, because if you're running this on, I don't know, like a Hyper 212 Evo or something, that's not necessarily going to do a very good job if managed to do it at all. You're going to be hitting near the 100 degrees on that, which is bad. So get yourself something high-end to actually match this very high-end CPU. And if you're thinking about overclocking, get yourself a 360mm radiator, or maybe even consider a custom loop, because that's exactly what these chips are crying out for. This has been the ultimate i9 gaming PC 2020. I really hope you've enjoyed it. I absolutely love the look of this thing. I'm going to be using this case, I think. Definitely got a lot of planning to do. If you want to do your own planning and actually look at current pricing on any of these parts, then you can do so with my Amazon affiliate links located down below. Now is the time to leave the comments down below with the whole AMD versus Intel. Which team are you on? What would you buy? Be very interested to hear from you on this one. And of course, if you have enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. It really does help out. You really wouldn't believe. If you want to see more builds like this, you can in the end screen or in the top right hand corner of your screen. Go and check it out. But thank you so much for checking out this video. I appreciate it. Get subscribed, all of that jazz, and I'll see you in the next one.